is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Sai. It's Sunday, it's fight night here on A.C.E Podcast Nation. Welcome to the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. This is episode number 97. We are nearly at 100 episodes. But tonight we'll be talking, of course, a big weekend of MMA with UFC and Bellator events last night, as well as speaking to our special guest, UFC Strawweight contender. So it's very, very much looking forward to having a chat to Cory. And of course, we'll be taking questions from the live chat and talking about various things. But just as we wait for some of the late stragglers to join us, a bit of housekeeping. Of course, we're live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. A.C.E Podcast Nation, of course, as well. Home to many great shows and series featuring top guests, expert analysts and more. Up to 3 shows a week live at least, if not 4. So please do give us a subscribe, click the bell for notifications. That helps us out a lot, as well as leave a like on the video, helps us get up there in the search engine and the old YouTube algorithms. And if you prefer your podcasts in audio form, then of course we're part of the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated sports podcast network. You can find this show and all the other series produced by A.C.E Podcast Nation there with their own little websites and similar. But joining me is former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend, and of course, most importantly, my co-host. It is Mr. Daniel Batten. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good, Si. And it's a double whammy weekend again. We're getting treated to these a little bit too often. We're getting too normal to it. UFC and Bellator, and some great fights on both, to boot as well.
Yes, and some big boxing news as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit. I don't know if it's good or bad or somewhere in between. But as ever, we have a special guest joining us, and I'm delighted to welcome back to the show UFC Strawweight, Cory Poppins McKenna. Nearly said it wrong. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. I noticed earlier, Cory, as well, when we were just chatting before we started, you're starting to get like a little bit of an American twang to your accent. You're losing that Welshness, I see.
I hear that a lot, but it's kind of funny because like I always used to complain about it. When I go to like England, they say I sound Welsh. When I go to Wales, they say I sound American, and then when I'm in America, they say I sound English. So I think I'm just a bit of a mutt.
Yeah, just a bit of everything. That's all right, though. It's good. A bit of variety. But I think the place to start, Cory, is obviously you were due to fight a few weeks back, and you had to pull out through injury. Obviously, as I just found out, you actually pulled out with a fight about a month before, but the online stuff and all the various cards still had you due to fight, because me and Danny, as I said to you, previewed the fight the week before. So that's, it's a strange one. It can't be helped. It's out of your hands. But how is like the injuries going and everything healing up?
Yeah, so like I pulled out like 4 weeks before it because at the end of the day, like I knew kind of that it wasn't looking likely that I was going to make the fight. Obviously I didn't want to pull out. But just out of respect for like Whitmire and the UFC staff, like I wanted to make sure they had enough time to find a replacement for me. We were
Cool.
originally weighing up trying to postpone the date, but we still wasn't sure what exactly was going on. So just out of like just out of respect, I pulled out entirely, probably for the best because I've only been back training for like a week or two. Still not taking any head contact. Had a little bit of like a setback a couple of weeks ago. So I'm still having to play it super safe. So yeah, so it wasn't ideal. Like I've never had to pull out of a fight before. Like I've fought with food poisoning. I've fought with like torn ligaments. I've fought with like like fractures and stuff like that. Like I've most things like I would fight through. I actually did 3 weeks of camp with like like migraines every day. I finished off Macy Barber's like last sparring session. I went in with like a banging headache and just forced myself to push through. But it eventually got to the point where like I couldn't push through and like I knew that there was clearly something wrong. So I ended up going to like the PI and everything and trying to get to the root of it. And I eventually had to pull out because we were still trying to figure stuff out and I was still trying to get better.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the exact nature of the injury that you had?
To be honest, still not really sure. It was theorized to be like a concussion. Due to like I've had a very extensive like health checkup. I've had all the MRIs, MRAs, I've had blood tests. And like nothing came up, which is obviously a good thing. Like I know when going back now that I don't have any like severe underlying problem. So we kind of just had to chalk it up to like concussion symptoms, which means obviously like say being very, very sensible coming back. I jumped back into training. I took a couple knocks to the head. It's like getting headaches again, so I had to step back. So it was kind of a weird one because I didn't necessarily take like a significant strike to cause it. It just started random. Like I woke up one morning and I was like, oh, I have a headache. And then they didn't go away for about 2 months, I think, until I had a break from the headaches. So we figured it could have been like a cumulative from just taking too much damage or something.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like when you get punched in the head for a living, I suppose it's one of those things, isn't it? Then you can't take any risks. Like even though now concussions and head trauma is still really quite an unknown subject in terms of the long-term effects, and especially like with the long-term effects, Danny, like dementia and things like that, and CTE, you still can't be diagnosed with CTE until after you die. So like, I think if fighters or anyone has any sort of symptoms regarding or relating to that type of thing, concussion, anything like that, you've got to take no risks at all straight away, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can have surgery to fix your knee and and all sorts of other injuries. You can sort of apply some kind of therapy, but your brain, that's a different kettle of fish completely. Yeah, it's a difficult subject to address, difficult for any fighter to assess as well. I really feel for you, Cory, because there was one time in my career where I really thought something had gone wrong. I competed once out in Japan against Mma, and I arrived back in the country, I think it was on the Wednesday, and then my coach at the time put me in to fight the weight division above against a guy called Gene Silva. Gene Silva was a real legend. He fought people the likes of Mma as well, and fought on Pride. Real tough Brazilian, but because of the flight and I had to go straight back to work, and I was a postman at the time. I had to get up early hours of Saturday morning and turn up to this fight. I really didn't want to do the fight. I said it wasn't a good idea. My coach at the time was saying that it would be, a great idea to sort of jump straight back in there because I'd lost in Japan and try and get a really notable win. This Gene Silva was training to fight someone who was who become a UFC champion, Jens Pulver, but he didn't show. So I took it short notice on that Wednesday after arriving from Japan, after arriving from a loss at featherweight. And featherweight in Japan, as many will know, is even lighter than the featherweight we have out here in Europe and over the States. It was at 63 kilos. So, yeah, and I'd taken this fight. The guy went and did a massive barrage of punches in that first round. And I felt something was wrong when I was on my back in the third round. I was getting this strange feeling like an air bubble was at the top of my head and feeling really dizzy and just didn't feel that good. It wasn't until I went home that night, I had to drive back from London, and I laid my head down to go to sleep. And again, that sensation of having like an air bubble from the back of my head went to the front of my head, and like the feeling of dizziness was horrendous. And basically there was concussion, but I was convinced I had something more, like a real neurological issue. It's something I quit the doctors about, and even was going to go to have brain scans, and I backed out of the whole lot. I had my daughter being due, I just didn't want to face up to what it may be, and it went on for weeks and weeks. Now I don't know how long yours went on for in total, but mine was about 8 to 10 weeks where I had the same symptoms that every time I laid down I felt like there was something floating around the top of my head. I think it was where I had like minor bleeding on the outer surface of my brain. And but I really feel for you, because it's one of those things that, with concussion, of course, it can heal on its own. Predominantly it does, and you're left none of the wiser. It might be the case for you, but it's not a nice place to be in. I don't know how much you worried about, but I really worried about my long-term health, particularly having a young family and stuff. And it actually made me retire for about 2 years.
Wow.
What did this do for you mentally? Did it give you real concerns about what was going on with your health?
I'm gonna be honest, like I'm the sort of person to where like all I cared about was the fight.
Wow.
But for me, like I think the most frustrating part was that we didn't know what it was. Like it was completely random. Everyone I talked to, they're like, look, it could like sounds like it could be a concussion, but like it was weird that it came up after like a day of jiu-jitsu. Like I hadn't even taken any blows to the head for like 2 days when it started. So for me, it was like it just seemed complete random. Like and I think it was the not knowing and the confusion around it. And also, like I said, every test I had was coming back okay. Like I was working with the PI, like we were fixing, like making sure my nutrition was like great. Like I have so many supplements. Like I was practically rattling. I was walking around with, just taking so much every day just to make sure that like my levels were up. So I think for me it was just a really frustrating, confusing period, because like again, this is the first time I've had an injury that I can't train around. Like I like tore the ligament in my arm. I was like single arm punching the bag and kicking the bag. Every time I have like an injury, I can usually train around it or do something. But like your head's messed up. You can't lift. You can't do cardio. Like like even just some days like I you don't even want to get out of bed. So it's kind of, for me it was really weird. Because like I say, like I've trained like 7 days a week since I was like 10 doing karate. So for me, like this is the longest break I've ever taken. Like I had to take like, it was coming up on like 2 months of not being able to do like any training. Like if my heart rate got to like 130, like I would have a headache. So for me it was very confusing and frustrating. And then also like it dragged on, because this started in like, I want to say it was June. So like it was going on for quite a few months. Like I said, I've only been back for like a week or two now. So for me it was really frustrating, like especially coming straight off of the ankle injury. Like I was really excited to get a fight booked. I've only just got in the UFC, so like everything felt like it was going great, and then like this year's kind of just sucked. So for me it was just really frustrating and confusing. I definitely had like a dramatic period where like I was like talking to my parents, my friends, and I was like, what if I never fight again, and all this. Like definitely had those, like, because at the end of it, I did not know what was going on. And like also like it's frustrating not being able to prove what's going on. Like at least if you like tear something or you like injure something, you could be like, look. But like I was just there like, oh, my head hurts, and like it's really hard to like prove or disprove it. But at least like I think over the years I've built like a bit of a reputation for training through things and being too stubborn anyway. So like people believed me, but like it was frustrating for me to not be able to be like, this is what's wrong, this is how I fix it. Like that ambiguity was kind of like it was killing me. Like I was sat home like, I don't know what's going on. Like everyone would ask me, they'd be like, why does your head hurt? And I'm like, I knew it wouldn't. Like
But that's the thing though, isn't it? You feel like sometimes people might point the finger at you that you're trying to avoid a particular bout, or I've had to pull out of fights before, and big famous one was pulling out from Lee Remedios that got a lot of attention, and there was just no way I could fight. I'd separated a rib, and and it was all down to trying to prove it. Well, I have got documentation for it if it had needed to be shown, but it was very, very frustrating, and just felt like under pressure to try and prove it. But of course, with kind of symptoms that you're having, you can't really kind of prove concussion. I don't know whether you can, whether they can prove something like that. But look, the body's a complex bit of kit, and we do a really quite an unusual sport in the big scheme. And when you're not feeling right upstairs, whether it's a psychological thing or whether it's an actual real physical style thing in terms of you getting headaches and stuff, I mean, quite possibly, it could be some kind of viral infection, because I know viruses, they can linger in the body, can't they, for weeks and even months.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether they can test for it.
Yeah, well, one of the first theories was obviously COVID, because a lot of the people that I know that have had COVID have been suffering with headaches and stuff since. But I had like an antigen test, I had a COVID test, like I was completely like negative of everything for that. And then like I had the MRIs and the MRAs, and like, my dad was like, well, no, it's a good thing that nothing came back. But in a way, I like, because he's like, if something came back, it could have been career ending. But also at the same time, I was like, I also wanted to prove that I wasn't just being a wimp.
Yeah.
But no, this fight was like a great fight for me. Like everyone knew that this was a great fight for me. Like I watched the fight, like I watched it live, and then straight away I rewound it and watched it like 3 times, and I was so mad because I honestly think like I'd have probably gone out there and got like a performance bonus. Like I honestly think like the fight matchup wise for me was great. So it was one of those ones where it was like I wasn't worried about the fight. Like even to the point my boxing coach was like, oh, I think you could go in there with a headache and be fine. But we didn't want to take that risk, because obviously, like, say if it was something severe, like last thing I want to do is be hard-headed and, end my career early. So it was just one of those frustrating things where it was like, it was a great fight. Like I was coming off an injury already. Like I felt ready. Like coming off the ankle surgery, it was weird. Like I think the time off for that, I focused on stuff around it and everything. I think coming off of that, like really, I actually felt better than I'd ever felt before. And then like the one thing I've taken away from this is like I'm definitely prioritizing recovery and stuff more. Like I say, like I've trained 7 days a week for the past 12 years. I'm really stubborn, and I always tell people that like rest is overrated and everything. But I think maybe now that I'm old and wise, I might actually have to listen to people when they tell me that my body needs recovery.
Old Danny.
Yeah, unbelievable. Didn't that just make you feel like even older? So I hearing her say that.
I'm like 40 in 2 weeks, and I feel even older now. There we go.
I'm sniffing down the barrel, looking at 50 in less than 2 years. How about that?
Yeah, I've also, however, I have also had a concussion, so I can say I'm in the gang. Mine was not from being a top level athlete, though. I fell off a wall when I was drunk backwards and landed on my head. And concussion, but it was not nice. I got to say, it was brutal for a good few weeks afterwards. I was being sick and headaches and stuff, and it's not a nice thing. And I think if you're getting if your job is to get hit and fight and do all this sort of head trauma stuff day to day, it's bound to have an effect. And I think obviously they're taking more precautions as we learn more about concussions and stuff, like within training and things like that. But ultimately, I think you still, even if you've got headgear on to spar and train, your head's still getting snapped back and rocking about, isn't it? So your brain is still going to be shaken and whatnot. Danny, very quickly, because I kind of want to get Cory's take on this as well. You mentioned about the weight limits in Japan, and weight cutting has been like quite a big story this week, but also really over the last couple of months, there's been a few little things. Like first you had, I forget who it was now, but there was, I think I was Aspen Ladd. There was a thing with her weight, not this most recent fight, but the fight before that had to be called off because they offered her opponent a catch weight because Aspen Ladd wasn't going to make the weight. And her opponent, who was well within her rights to do so, said, no, I don't want the fight. Then Nick Diaz was way overweight in fight week. So they offered Robbie Lawler a catch weight or the next weight up or whatever it was. And then, Robbie Lawler, being the guy that he is, was like, no, I just want to fight. And then this week, Paulo Costa was 20 pounds overweight.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not making any attempt whatsoever, surely.
And there was, I forget which journalist it was. It might have been Ariel. No, it wasn't. It was John McCarthy said on Twitter, so if a fighter doesn't make weight, their opponent, if the fight goes ahead, their opponent takes 40% of their purse.
Right.
Or 20%, one or the other.
I think it's less,
but takes a percentage of their purse, doesn't it? But because, so John McCarthy said, because they changed the fight to light heavyweight, he effectively made weight then for that.
Right.
So, I forgot his name. Marvin Vettori didn't get a cut of Paulo Costa's weight of purse because they changed the weight of the fight, which meant that he made weight. Now, to me, I think it was Anthony Rumble Johnson said today on social media, he had several issues in his UFC career with weight cutting, and he missed weight, and he got a lot of criticism for it, rightly or wrongly. He got a lot of criticism for it, and it ultimately probably cost him. I think he had one too many issues with weight, and was one of the reasons he got cut. Not the only reason, but one of them. And he said, even if I didn't think I was going to make weight, I would bust a gut trying to make that weight. And I might miss it by a few pounds, but I would always try. Paulo Costa has basically rocked up this week. His manager's gone to Vettori's manager and said, look, should we do this fight at light heavyweight? Because he's not going to make weight. And he was 20 pound overweight. That to me is such a piss take. And then the attitude on him, he was asked after the fight last night, did you apologize to your opponent? And he just laughed and said no. And to me, it's disrespectful. And I know a lot of people view it as cheating because he's trying to get an advantage. Because obviously he was substantially bigger than Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori had been, even if he hadn't started his severe sort of weight cutting in the last couple of days, he would have been watching his weight and eating the right things and making sure his weight was under control. Because I think, most fighters, they try and sort of go on an even keel, don't they? They don't try and lose it all in the last week. They try and generally and gradually lose it. And I just felt I know a lot of people I saw saying, and My Ultimate Sweat there said in the chat, he says, for me, it's nothing, it's weight, it's just cheating. He says it's a piss take that it's being that much overweight, because it is a lot, 20 pounds. So I'm going to ask you first, Danny, as an ex-fighter, as a coach. If you were Marvin Vettori, I admire him because he's game and he just wanted to fight. But it does feel a bit like he got stitched up a little bit because he didn't get a cut of his purse because he didn't technically miss weight. And he had to fight someone substantially bigger who hadn't been through a weight cut.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be stitched up if he had his hand forced and, he had no choices. It was made to do it. But the fact that he chose to do it, he knew the circumstances going in. But all the more power to him to have the confidence to face and feel that he can beat Paulo Costa at any weight is nothing but a commendance to, his ability as a fighter. He's confident as a fighter and confidence in his team to do that. So I just think it just goes to show you where Vettori sits mentally and where he feels that he's at in his career. And he has looked better and better every fight, I've got to say. He really, really impresses me. I think he's still on the increment of his potentials. I think he's going to carry on improving for the next number of years. And I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he'll be having another pop at Adesanya sometime soon.
Mate, it shows how good Adesanya is that he was able to quite easily deal with both these guys.
Yeah, he did.
Cory, where do you, as a current fighter, where do you stand on that? Would you feel disrespected if an opponent came in that much overweight? There's no effort being made to...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I was him and I was going to take the fight anyway, I'd have told him to try to get as close to the weight and then just taking it and then taking the percentage of the purse.
Yeah, play the game.
Why change the weight? But like Danny said, that's not, he didn't have his hands forced. He made that decision. Yeah, so I actually had a similar situation. It wasn't quite so drastic, but my opponent missed weight by just over 8 pounds, which
It's
when you're
still a
fighting at
lot, isn't it?
115 pounds, like
That's still a lot.
proportionately, it's actually about the same. And like I'm kind of the same, like you said about Vettori, like thinking he could beat anyone and kind of want to fight. I had to agree with my manager before we went to the weigh-ins because we knew that she was probably going to miss weight. Like, we told them like 4 months before they booked the fight not to book this girl because I didn't think she'd make strawweight. They did it anyway. It was like a whole thing. So I was like, whatever, like we'll see. Then they phoned up that morning and they asked for like a 119 catch weight, and I was like, no, I'm on weight. I wasn't, but I was close. And I told them, I told them 4 months in advance that I would not take the fight if she missed weight by even a pound because I was that like, no, professionalism. So yeah, they asked for a 119 catch weight and we said no. And then like I showed up to the venue on weight and she weighed in at like, I think it was like 123 and a half, 124 something. So she was like over 8 pounds over. And yeah, she got on the scale, she just sort of laughed and smiled at me. I got really mad, like I kind of like, I yelled like, what the hell do you think you're doing? But like before we even went to the venue, like I had to make an agreement with Jack. I was like, nope, we'll stick to it. If she misses weight, we don't take the fight. Like we've told them that. Obviously we got there, she missed weight. I was like, I'll fight her, and Jack was like, nope, we agreed. So I already before we got there, I had to make him promise to, stop me from taking the fight because he knows what I'm like. But yeah, like it's. At that point, like you say, it's not even trying. Like no one makes you cut weight. No one tells you what weight division to go in. Like you make those choices, and that's why when people constantly like debating whether weight cutting should be banned or not, like at the end of the day, it's the athlete's responsibility. Like I choose to cut weight to 115. Like if that was too hard for me, if I felt like that was draining me, if my coaches felt like that was bad for my performance, I would move up. At the end of the day, like no one tells you you have to be in this weight division. No one tells you you have to cut this much weight. Like, and at the end of the day, like I'm not saying if you're 3 weeks out from a fight, like, and you're 30, 40 pounds over, you're not going to make weight. Like, it's common sense at the end of the day. So, yeah, at that point, like, I wouldn't necessarily feel disrespect on my part. I just think it kind of says a lot about the professionalism of the person that misses weight. And also, like, say, like, I probably wouldn't have settled for a catch weight or let them move it up like that much. Like, say, he was probably under that weight already. Like say hats off to him for being confident taking it, but at the end of the day, like it's professionalism. It's I will always make weight, which means that regardless of what my opponent says or asks for, like I will make the weight, and then like negotiations can be made after that.
So two things kind of stuck out for me there, Cory, with what you said. The first one is you mentioned it at the start and at the end. It's professionalism, and to me in the Paulo Costa situation, and I got to be honest, in the Nick Diaz situation, neither one of them made any effort whatsoever to make weight. And to me, that's such a lack of professionalism. And for Marvin Vettori to not get his cut of Costa's purse, I think almost adds salt to the wound. And I saw someone else make a really good point online as well. It was one of the journalists. But can you imagine if Paulo Costa or anybody else went in and they moved the weight up a bit to accommodate the bigger fighter, and so say Paulo Costa was miles bigger than Vettori because he's not made any effort to cut weight. Vettori's underweight, and then something bad happened and someone got hurt. Like I can't imagine that Marvin Vettori's family, coaches, etc., would be particularly happy if they got hurt by someone who's basically made no effort to cut weight. And I really pisses me off. I know that it's the risk with the fight, but
also like Danny said, like they didn't make him do it. Like the athlete has free choice. As I said, like again with the getting a cut of the purse, he kind of played himself on that. Like I say, if you stick to your guns and say no, I'm going to make weight, he should get close, or even like settle for a lower catch weight so that he has to at least try to cut a bit more and he still misses. Like I feel like with that, maybe it was a little bit of like business thinking didn't get applied.
Yeah, it sounds like you think Marvin Vettori should have played the game a little bit and asked him to really make an effort to at least cut some weight instead of just agreeing to the like heavyweight weight.
If they ask for a 190 catch weight, ask for something a little bit lower. Like best case he misses it, you get a cut. Like even if he makes the weight, he's going to feel terrible because he's had to cut more weight. I would never settle for what my opponent wants, especially like, say, at the end of the day, like amateurs, when you're trying to find your weight division, like, or even like your first few pros, like when you're this experienced, like you should know what you're doing. And it's not like we don't have the resources. At the end of the day, like we have the Performance Institute, we have access to all the nutritionists there, we have access to, they have weight cut specialists, they have people there on fight week helping you. At the end of the day, I feel like at this level, there's pretty much no excuse. And I really do think it comes down to like professionalism and kind of using your head a little bit.
Cory,
Absolutely.
how much? I completely agree with you, by the way. But I was just going to say, how much? Like, if you've got two fighters, taking out the weight limits and stuff, like if you go two fighters who've made light heavyweight in their thing last night, but one person's been through a weight cut and one hasn't. How much of an advantage is that in terms of how the body feels and stuff, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it really depends on the athlete, and like kind of what their skill set is. Because you have people that are more technical, you have people that rely more on like their strength and stuff. Like if it depends what type of fighter you are. Because like I've had some rough cuts, I've had some really big cuts. Like say I'm stubborn and I believe in professionalism, so like there's been times where I've started on a Thursday afternoon and not finished until right before the weigh-ins. Like it took me like 4 hours to get half a pound off. Like at one point, like it was like I've had my share of rough cuts. That might have been exaggerating. I think it took me like 2 hours, but even still, like it we were cut, like we were cutting a lot, and like stuff happens, especially like I hate the excuses that women use, but there are complications in that regards too that do. I don't think it makes it acceptable to miss weight. I just understand that it makes it harder. But I think it really depends on the person. So like I've had rough cuts and gone in there and felt even better than when I like fights where I've not cut at all. But I'm also like, I think my whole thing when I fight is a lot of mentality and heart. Like I'm very stubborn, so regardless of how I feel, I'm going to go out there and kind of fight down. Whereas I know people that don't cut too much, but they're a little bit in their head, and like their body feels a bit drained, and then that really affects their performance. So I think it really depends on the person, and also like how they do it. Like some people cut weight like idiots at the end of the day, like like they starve themselves for days. They completely deplete their body in like an unhealthy way. Whereas there is a science behind cutting weight. Like if you do your research and you work with you work with people that specialize in this, like the best ways to do it. So I think it really depends. Like you say, like I've cut 10, 12 pounds before and felt completely fine the next morning. Whereas I know friends that have cut like 5 and felt really rough because they've just not done it smart. So I think it really comes down to whether you've used your resources and kind of done it correctly. So I think
you
teach your own.
Yeah, I can imagine it seems like it'd be different for depending on the person and also mentality, like you mentioned, comes into it as well. You also mentioned where your opponent didn't make the weight and you had seen it coming perhaps a mile off, as it were. And you mentioned that it irritated you and you had a bit of a reaction when they would have weighed in. What about Marvin Vettori had a very similar reaction, didn't he? Where he seemed to be fine when they sort of had the face-off until Paulo Costa gave him like a bit of an arrogant kind of smile. He seemed to be fine, Marvin Vettori, with the face-off and being quite professional and quite calm. And then as soon as kind of Costa came in, seemingly not really caring, that's when that seemed to set Marvin Vettori off a lot. And I guess I can only guess because I haven't been through it, but I feel like that's what would set me off. If the person came in and they were, they did what they were supposed to do in the business and they do the face off and stuff. And maybe they sort of say to you, look, I apologize, whatever. That's one thing. But to kind of go in with the attitude that Paulo Costa's had this week and after the fight of just simply not caring, that would irritate me more. Would that be the same for you? Would you feel a little less irritated and irked by it if they were apologetic, or does it come down to the fact, like, if you're not professional, you're not professional, especially if you knew, I suppose, in your case, that they weren't going to make weight?
So I was definitely going to be annoyed regardless. It definitely did not help. Like I say, she literally got on the scales. They called out like 123, 124, like, and she just kind of smirked and like kind of laughed, and like that really made me mad. A lot of the guys didn't actually realize what happened, and like they were coming up to me, they're like, "You literally look like you want to fight someone right now," and I was like, like I had to get out of there because I was like I don't really get mad. I'm not really an emotional person. Like I've never gone into a fight angry, but like that really. That really annoyed me. Like I paid thousands to come out to Team Alpha Male. I had sponsors. I had family drive all the way to Wales to watch me. Like, like there was so many, like there's so many things that go into like fight shows and stuff that people don't realize. Like, you put in a 3-month camp. Like this sport is, I think, like up until you make it, it's one of the most expensive sports. Like, especially back in the UK, because like you don't have like the resources so much. Like there's a lot of private training. There's a lot of there's a lot of traveling to make sure you've got the partners and trying to make sure that you get like a professional schedule, because a lot of gyms aren't full time. I think like there's a lot more now, but like, a few years ago that like, I'd have to drive to one gym for morning, I'd have to drive to another gym for evening, and I'd have to fill my day with private sessions, and it eventually adds up. And like all that side of stuff, like that's worth it. But when you get to the fight and like, it's completely out of your hands, like you show up, you're professional, you've done all the training, you've put your all into it, and then just for your opponent to be like, is what it is. Like it does. I think that definitely comes across a little bit like say a little bit disrespectful. At least show some remorse, and like say like the girl that I had, like she asked for a 119 catch weight and then weighed in way over that as well. So I think that also annoyed me. But no, definitely like it. I think you should definitely feel bad if you miss weight. Like at the end of the day, that's a complete lack of professionalism. And yeah, I think also like if you just laugh it off, and like it almost is kind of like, I hate to say it, but like felt like she kind of thought it was a bit of a mug and just going to take it anyway. So like yeah, it definitely comes across a lot more disrespectful if you're not showing any remorse or apologetic or anything.
Yeah, Gaz in the chat said you were going to wreck that girl. You were angry. So there's rampant speculation from Donna in the chat. She joined us a little bit late. She's added a new country to the mix of your accent. She said she sounds Australian, but I thought she might be British and just lived in Australia for a year or so. So yeah, American, Australian, Welsh, English. Cory McKenna, can you clarify for Donna where you're from?
Yeah, no Australian. I get that a lot out here actually. They don't know the difference though.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I actually had someone the other day in like a store or something, and they were like, they literally like, they were like, oh, where are you from or something, or we were talking about the rain, and I was like, oh well, I'm from the UK, and then she's like, oh, so where in Australia is that? And I was like, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And My Ultimate Sweat says there's certainly a little scouse in there when she says like. That's a Welsh thing though as well, isn't it? I say that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're Welsh, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I definitely have a lot of Welsh tendencies with stuff I say. I can't even think of it on the spot, but like especially when Mason's out here, like I'll have a conversation with Mason and then I'll go talk to someone else and they're like, "Why do you sound more Welsh?" It definitely comes out a lot then. And then yeah, like and obviously I grew up a bit in Essex too, so I have like a little bit of that. And then my mum's a Brummie, so it's kind of it's a whole mess.
Yeah, Donna says you sound like you're off Neighbours. There you go. There you go. Cory, what I'd like to do, because I think the last time you came on the show was before we kind of changed things up a little bit, is I do like to take our guests right back to the beginning of their combat sports journey. How did you mentioned you used to do karate like pretty much every day. Like, how did you get into martial arts, combat sports, MMA, and how old were you? And tell us a bit about the start. Yeah,
so kind of just as a hobby. My mom was doing karate with my brother, like it was like a mums and toddler thing locally. I tried every sport, like I did athletics, I did cross country for my school, like I played basketball until I stopped growing at like 12. So like just a very athletic family, and like I said, like I was involved in a lot of sports, but I never really found something that I took to, and I'm very I'm gonna use how Uriah describes me. I'm naturally ungifted when it comes to anything physical. So when I tried karate, I actually didn't like it at first. I think I tried it when I was around 8 and I didn't like it. And then I came back to try it again when I was like 10, and I kind of just clicked naturally. Like it was something that like everyone said I was naturally good at, which as a kid, naturally you enjoy things more when you're when you're good at it. And I just started competing at that and everything, and I really enjoyed it. And then at like 11, 12, that school introduced like Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu. So I started doing that. And then like I started trying to like, I wanted to compete in that. I was competing in jiu-jitsu like pretty much every weekend. And my dad just kind of turned around one day and was like, well, you're doing everything. Like, why don't you give MMA a go? So that's when I went down BKK to try it. And I ended up moving there and just training MMA pretty much every day from 13.
Wow. So what was the journey like then from sort of doing it as what were the differences at that young age from sort of doing it as a hobby to then sort of starting to train it properly?
Like I said, like I've always been one of those people that like if I'm going to do something, like I'm 100% in. You know, like I completely like give it my all. So you know when I was competing in karate, I was training karate pretty much like 7 days a week. Once I started competing jiu-jitsu, like I started doing every jiu-jitsu class. I went to the MMA gym again. Like we would train. You know, we'd have MMA on Saturday and Sundays, and then through the week I would do like all the MMA and like all the disciplines like by itself, like through the week. I was like, I think once I hit 14, I was like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. Like this is my like kind of job. And then once I hit 15, I started nagging at Jack to get me a fight because I've been training for like 2 years. You know, like I've been in the adults classes from 13. Luckily, they had like a 13. I think he was about my age, like 13-year-old boy. You know, seen him on the Facebook page in the adults classes, and I was like, you know, I showed up and I was like, I want to work with him. I want to be in the adults classes. I want to work with him. So, you know, I went in and sparred with him, kind of everyone, you know, gained everyone's respect a little bit. And then I just started doing the adults classes like every day. Like I said, I was competing in jiu-jitsu practically every weekend. I started having like, you know, I started in Muay Thai in the clubs, and then, you know, I started having Muay Thai fights. So it got a few titles at that. Like, you know, I was like multiple time British and English champion at jiu-jitsu. So I kind of built my skill set separately. And then at 15, you know, Jack ran BCMMA. It's now Cage Warriors Academy. So I started nagging on at him. He was obviously very reluctant at first. But, you know, now there's been so many like young amateurs on that card. Like I think it kind of opened his eyes to the fact that it is actually a great opportunity. And at the end of the day, like this sport is so regulated, and you know the referees are so good and so on it. Especially with like you say, like being younger, they were completely on it. Like it was completely safe. But yeah, I had my first amateur fight at 15. Had 7 amateurs, 2 weight champ, and then I turned pro at 18, and here we are.
Indeed. So like when I was younger, which is obviously a long time ago, and I think to a certain degree now is still a little bit the same, but not as much as it was back then. But a lot of the time, if you had females who were good at sports, whether it was karate or football or what, you know, rugby, anything, what you would find is that there wouldn't be enough girls around at the same level to compete against. So they'd quite often have to compete against boys. Was that the same for you, or was it kind of not allowed and you had to wait?
So jiu-jitsu, definitely, I pretty much compete against boys all the time. And then there was like one girl, Charlie Simkin, that I went against. Like she's now a black belt, and we compete against each other at pretty much every competition until, like I say, I stopped growing at around 12. She kept going like a normal person. You know, but we were competing. Like my dad would drive me like 3 hours to a jiu-jitsu competition, knowing that I was going to have one match with her and probably lose. But you know, we kept going. You know, eventually I closed that gap. She's like a super high level jiu-jitsu girl. But other than that, like I was competing against boys. You know, my mum was the crazy mum, stood at the side of the mats going, "That's my daughter," as like some boys crying his eyes out, bless him. Like, you know, but yeah, like say, like I was competing jiu-jitsu, definitely competing against boys a lot. Like obviously Muay Thai was girls. I feel like Muay Thai is a lot more popular. When it came to the MMA, luckily there was a local girl, same age, same weight, like, and we pretty much had the same experience too, so it was perfect. So I had my amateur MMA debut against her. I won that by like ground and pound, which I predicted when I was like 13, 14. I told my mom, I was like, I love ground and pound. I was like, I need to win like this. So that was kind of cool. And then I flew to Ireland for my second fight. I think I was still 15 at the time. So my second amateur fight, I flew to Ireland. At least when you grapple, you don't call it a coach. That's funny. Sorry, I was reading the comments. Yeah, so I flew to Ireland. I fought a girl there. And then once I turned 16, I just started competing against adults. And that was pretty much it. Like I said, once I turned 16, it was a bit more. Didn't sound quite so bad.
Beating them up as well. You've beaten the boys up, you've beaten the girls up, so you just moved on to the adults as well.
It was definitely difficult. Like, you know, there were times when people were like, "No, I'm not going to fight her. Like, she's young enough to be my daughter and stuff." And like you say, like it was definitely hard to find fights as a 16-year-old, like trying to fight adults and stuff. But I think once I got to a point where kind of like I was a bit more reputable and like regarded a bit more seriously on the scene. You know, I started fighting like the IMAF champions and stuff, and kind of just built from there. But it was definitely hard to get fights. I had pullouts all the time. Like, you know, I was constantly on at Jack. Like Jack pulled out all the stops for like my amateur and my pro career, to be honest. Like that man goes above and beyond for me.
What was your feelings like when you made your pro debut? Like, were you nervous and stuff, or was it a big occasion for you, or was it just another fight?
So I was originally meant to make my pro debut in November. I came out here it was my first time coming out here for a camp by myself. I was 17, nearly 18. And I actually ended up tearing my UCL in my elbow. And that was about a 6-month recovery. So that was pretty rough. So obviously my pro debut got pushed back to the March, but instead of being on a Cage Warriors Academy, it was pushed onto the Cage Warriors card. Because I just moved back to Wales. And there was a Welsh card, so I ended up pushing it back onto that. And I was, you know, it was my pro debut. I'd just come off a 6-month injury. Like, I'll be honest, like my arm was still playing me up, like in training and stuff. But you know, like I said, I'm too stubborn for my own good sometimes, so I pushed on through. You know, and then I opened up the like I was first on the main event, like the main card. Sorry, it was a crazy experience. But I was just so excited to get in there. You know, I got a little bit elbow happy. I was icing my elbows for weeks, as you do. But no, that whole thing for me, like especially like with it getting postponed and me coming off an injury, like it almost like I was just excited because it built so much, and it was something that I'd wanted for so long. So yeah, I kind of just felt like a kid on Christmas.
We got some great questions in the live chat, which I want to get to in just a second. But I did want to ask you this because I'll forget, because I've got an exceptionally bad memory. How did the sort of joining Team Alpha Male come about? Obviously, a world-renowned gym training facility. Like, how did that come about for someone based, you know, in Wales and Essex and stuff?
So obviously, like say, growing up, like I was about 14 when I decided that this was kind of something I wanted to pursue professionally, and I wanted to train full time and everything. Like I made that decision, and obviously we knew that, like, given the girl scene, the local scene, like in terms of training partners, also like you say, there wasn't many like full time professional gyms around. We knew eventually I'd probably have to branch out with my training and find like a home away from home to at least get my camps in. So like my family are crazy supportive, and when I left school, so I left school after my GCSE, so I was 16. We took a family holiday to America, and we trialed a few different gyms. Like we had like a road trip. I went to King's MMA. I went to Glendale where Rousey trains. I came to Team Alpha Male. You know, we did like a road trip, and then the year after that, I actually went and did 2 weeks at ATT. And then so then when my 18th birthday came around, or like a few months before it, my parents were like, right, we'll buy you a training camp. You know, you can go for 8 weeks to whatever gym you like the most, whatever gym you think suits you, and whatever gym you think is going to, you know, give you what you need for your pro debut at the end of the year. And I felt like Team Alpha Male fit me, you know, stylistically. They had a lot of girls at the time, you know, little men. So like for me like everything kind of fit perfectly. I had a good, you know, kind of connection with the coaches and everything. And the gym reminds me a lot of BKK, to be honest, which is obviously where I started my career, in terms of like their mentality and their style and everything. So it just kind of, it felt like the right fit for me. So yeah, I chose Team Alpha Male, came out here. I ended up obviously coming home. It was like a 9-week trip. I came home after 4 weeks because, like I say, I tore my elbow. But it was a great experience, and I really, got along well with everybody, made a good connection with everybody, and I just started coming out here pretty much 3 months on, 3 months off ever since. And now I live here.
Yeah, and now you live there, exactly right.
Yeah.
So just before I let Danny get a word in edgeways, I'm going to throw in some questions from the live chat, because there's a range of questions from: did you beat your brother up? Did you used to beat your brother up, should it be? Craig wants to know.
Let's just say, yeah. So my brother used to train. I was actually his coach for the longest time. I started coaching kids classes in like 2013. So I was his coach for a while, but the kid definitely knew who was boss. I mean, he's like 6 foot now, and I'm pretty sure if I walked in the room and I flinched at him, he'd still run. So
No.
I definitely haven't trained well. I don't think I ever got to the point of having to actually beat him up.
Right. There we go. Donna Perry wants to know, why is your nickname Poppins?
So it was originally Hobbit, which naturally is a shot at the fact that I'm always the shortest person in the gym. I came to Team Alpha Male and I'm still the smallest person on the mats, which is kind of upsetting. I was promised Uriah Faber was like 4'10", but here we are. But no, so I don't know if anyone, like, if you guys follow me on social media or whatever, like, I'm pretty much always with one of the kids. So I'm like the local babysitter. Also, it originally started because obviously British. So Faber would be like, "Oh, you're British. You're like Mary Poppins, and you're really proper and nice." And then obviously, like the kids love me and stuff. So he just kind of thinks it's funny. And then, like I say, like, he loves making puns about popping ligaments, popping people in the face. He'll be like, "Oh, a spoonful of sugar, like, makes my opponent go down," or whatever. And like he ran with it. He ran with it. He fought the Hobbit hard. Like, he did not like it. He fought it like tooth and nail. I kind of just kept that as a bit of homage to BKK, because they've called me the Hobbit since I was like 13. I was competing in Muay Thai, and my coach one day looked at me and was like, "We're about to walk out for a fight." And he's like, "You really are just a little Hobbit." And then that kind of stuck. But once Faber got me the contenders fight, I was like, all right. I was like, just as a thank you, I was like, I'll go with Poppins. And it seems to have gone pretty well so far.
Excellent. And then maybe a not so easy question to answer. Maybe it is, I don't know. Rob Boyle asked, he says, maybe too controversial to ask. So that's always a good start to a sentence. But how would Cory feel about going up against a transgender fighter like Fallon Fox, for example?
Oh, good question.
No. You say no? Like you say, it's going to be controversial regardless. And I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's definitely not something that I would personally be okay with. Like I say, I spar with a lot of men and stuff, and I'm not worried about it. At the end of the day, like, it's my career and my safety, and I do think that my friend made a point the other day, like, you don't ever see. I'm really trying to be PC and not offend anybody, but it's going to happen. Like, you don't see any women transferring. I don't know, transitioning. That's what it is. Transitioning and fighting men. Do you? Like, at the end of the day, like, when is a woman transitioning on, I'm going to fight a man? Like, I understand the whole argument of like the hormone levels and things even out and everything, but at the end of the day, like, structurally and everything, there are going to be still like some advantages and stuff, and it just like I say, it's a very awkward, kind of touchy subject, like, especially with how sensitive people are these days. But for me, yeah, I don't really think I don't really think it's okay.
Yeah, me and Danny have talked about it a few times over the 90 odd shows where it's come up, and we kind of agree. Like, so an example I would use, and I know it's not the same as fighting, but there is an advantage there. There's no denying it. You can't sort of get away from it. So what I would say is, if you go and watch, recently there was a relay, athletics relay event. I'm not sure where it was, but it was a mix of men and women doing each leg. So you could pick the order if you had 2 women and 2 men on each team, but you can pick the order. So the men could run against the women if you chose, or you could just do it like it was up to the individual teams. So the Nigerian team chose to put instead of having the male runner like all the other teams as the last leg, they put a male runner at the third leg and a female runner at the last leg, with the thinking being that the male runner would get so far ahead on the third leg that then the female runner would be able to take it home. So on the third leg, as kind of, I guess people would expect, the male runner against all the other female runners got literally, I think it was like an 8-second lead or something like that. It was like 3/4 of the track. It was a 400-meter, like a full loop of the circuit. He was sort of 3/4 of the track ahead when he made the baton transfer for the final leg. And the lady who obviously the fourth leg is your fastest runner available to you in terms of, so it would have been the fastest lady they've got on their team. She was ahead for, I think, about quarter of the last lap. She actually finished last by quite some distance after having, a 10-second lead and being miles and miles and miles ahead of everybody else. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's the same as fighting, but what I'm saying is that there's just a basic physiology generally, which gives them like males are bigger, stronger, etc., in most cases. And I just think when you add in fighting to that mix, someone could potentially get seriously hurt, and fighting's dangerous enough as it is. Not a subject I particularly want to delve into too much, because you know what it's like. I will upset someone, and I don't want to do that.
I think it's a great subject, and why not discuss these difficult
less about what people do with who they who they are, who they want to be. I couldn't care less, but I don't want to offend anyone. What people want to do is up to them, but also I don't want to see someone get hurt in this. I think
the difficulty is that they're trying to be inclusive, not just socially, but trying to force this inclusion on the competitive realm, and it starts to not fit. I mean, I really feel for people who have identity issues, and you got in all these complex things that I truly don't understand. In any real detail, we can only really forge opinions about them. But you got this Laura Hubbard that used to be a male competitor, competed recently in the Olympics for deadlifting, and that from her country, I think it's New Zealand she was from, or Australia. I think it's New Zealand. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone wants to make a comment about that. But regardless, she just recently got, or he, as a transition from he to she, just won Sports Personality of the Year in their country as well. And I just think there's such effort to try and force the masses to go along with this. I don't know what to call it, almost like gameplay. We have these topics at the gym. If I was someone that as a kid always wanted to play army, and I see myself as a military guy, and then they try to force it that just because in my world I want to be a military guy and play army, everyone else that's around me have got to act like it as well. I feel like sometimes with someone with trans, we're kind of being forced, even if we know that they're a guy and they want to be a girl, or girl and they want to be a guy, we're forced to go along with it and treat them as such. And I just think it's such a difficult thing. You've got recent issues with mixed toilets as well. I know we're kind of coming off the sporting realm here, but there's such difficulties in society. But to bring it into the sporting realm and the combat sports, wow, I just don't know. It's an ugly affair. And Cory, you come up with a really good observation. You don't see it the other way around, and for good reason, because they won't be competitive. But listen, if the Olympics starts having men identifying as women coming into the sport, you're going to have an awful lot of problems. I mean, all the records are going to get smashed. There is advantages. It's not just about testosterone. I think people fall into the trap of thinking that levels of testosterone depict your ability to perform in any given sport. let's just say specific for the Olympics, but that's not actually so. You get larger lung capacity, you have bigger blood flow, you've got bone size, height, but a lot of arguments that I've heard on debates about it, because I do love a debate and I'm always open-minded to hear both sides, but on the other side of it, someone would argue that, well, if you've got a female runner that's 6'2" up against a female runner that's 5'2", and it's a long distance race, well, ain't the one with the long legs got the advantage? That makes it unfair. So they're trying to say, well, unfairness is just a nature of competitive sport. But there's you could take this to the streams. I think it's being demonstrated now. You just recently had a male Canadian team enter into the female netball team because they all said, well, look, there's not enough male netball competitors, so let's all club together and make an all-male team. And they just recently slaughtered every female team, and now there's a lot of people kicking off saying, well, they should have been chivalrous and let the female win the final. But obviously the men didn't, and they completely trust the women. It's just like so many complicated things that can come of this.
I think
it's really hard.
Other thing is, like, there's been a few cases, I think, in America where in like the amateur sporting events where there's been male to female transition, and then those athletes have brought just like all the previously held sort of local records and state records and everything, like they've kind of been broken and smashed, and it just becomes a problem. Like Sharon Davis, former Olympic swimmer, is kind of quite vocal about the opportunities that it takes away from female athletes and things like this. But ultimately for me, and I can only speak for me at the end of the day, for me in combat sports, it is a safety thing, and I will never change my mind about that, because I just don't think it's fair. I don't think it's safe. And I think
I'm just reading on here when I was mentioning about the netball team. I mean, that happened recently, but the first time a male, it says here on 26th of June 2019, New Zealand, because New Zealand are very, very progressive in their thinking, very, very left leaning run country. In the New Zealand men's netball side competed for their first televised match, beating the Fuji women's team by 93-19. It's just, not even the slightest bit. It's just going to decimate women's sport. Like I said before, women's sport have had such difficulty trying to get on equal par to men regards, coverage,
finances,
sponsorship, finances, such difficulty. And then to finally get them to sort of like some sort of equal positioning, and then bring this agenda to it to complicate matters. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me. But look, other people that are watching this might have other views, and it'd be great to see the comments come through. I'm always really open-minded. If someone can give me scientific proof and evidence that it is an equal playing field if you have a male transition to be a woman and then compete in any given sport, and it would be equal, then do so. But all I've ever seen is that as men in their given sport that they was competing in as a male were nothing of an impactive competitor, then transition to a woman, and suddenly they're breaking records and they're top tier. It's just not right.
We kind of got in the weeds a little bit with that question. Thanks, Rob.
Hard.
It's Rob's fault. Blame Rob. I don't mind having conversations about, at the end of the day, it's a hot topic. But ultimately, I don't want to offend anyone, don't want to upset anyone. But like, the last thing I would say, because Rob did mention Fallon Fox specifically, the one issue that I did take with Fallon Fox specifically is I think it was her first professional fight, or it might have even been a couple of fights after she transitioned. She didn't, or I don't know whether she didn't tell her opponent or her opponents weren't aware that she was transgender. Now, I think that is kind of like quite a dangerous precedent, because she's gone on and I think in one of her fights she fractured the skull of her opponent, and her opponent had to retire.
Yeah.
Like, if someone, like, so say, just using Cory as an example, if Cory was offered a fight and Cory is happy to take that fight with that person and she's aware of the circumstances and that person's transgender, then that's kind of up to Cory, isn't it? But if you don't know, I think that's a problem. Is it not? Am I being wrong there? Like, would you say that's fair, Cory? If you want to take the fight, that's kind of up to you. But if you don't know, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, and the same argument I did with like the weight divisions. Like at the end of the day, like no one in this sport forces you to take a fight, make a weight, do anything. Like Danny said, like your hand is never forced. They can't do that. So at the end of the day, like I said, if you know the circumstances, then definitely. Also, I feel like if you do a little bit of research before accepting a fight with a lot of these, transitioning people, it's kind of easy to find because, as Danny said, they do tend to be quite vocal about their stuff and kind of want it to be very widely recognized and accepted. And like I said, like you said, like I don't care what I really don't care. Like, as long as everyone's like people are happy and they're doing what's best for them. Like I don't have much of an opinion in regards to like say like I don't mind what people are doing with their own personal life and stuff. But at the end of the day, like I don't want to offend any snowflakes, but but like at the end of the day, like I wouldn't personally be comfortable with that. And I feel like at the same time, like if you are a person that is considering making that transition, it's just one of the things you have to weigh up. Like if you sit there and you're like, okay, this is what I think I need as a person, unfortunately it comes down to your priorities. If that's what you need, you have to accept the consequences of perhaps losing out on your competitive sport. If you truly want to fight, then perhaps you need to prioritize that and risk not making that change quite so soon. Obviously, like you say, it is a very touchy subject, and it is something that people like us don't necessarily understand too in depth, and I don't think anyone can ever really understand someone else's thought process. And I think anyone else can kind of understand, like you can't understand what's going on in their head, but at the same time, like it comes down to priorities. Like, it's priorities and sacrifices, and that's what kind of makes or breaks you in combat sports. And I think that kind of applies to this subject too.
Yeah.
Like, if you really want to be a world champion fighter or something, like you have to accept that this decision might take that option away from you, and it just comes down to what you want.
So
yeah, it might seem as well, for people who are listening. Sorry, Simon. It might seem that we're like being against people on a personal level here, but we are discussing things on a generalized thing. If I'm sure we would all agree. Let me know if you don't. Perhaps you might have even stronger views, and perhaps I do. I don't mind what you want to pretend to be. You can pretend to be Spot the dog if you want. That's up to you. If that really makes you happy, and then you even have these, don't you? I've seen a documentary on it where people they're into cosplay and stuff like that. I mean, it's a bit like it's a bit crazy, but it happens out there. But I'm not against anyone thinking or wanting to act like they want to be a particular type of thing or person. That's up to them. I'm really quite accepting of anyone, but I just want to reiterate, really, I've actually come across trans people, and I actually have someone who's a student who is gender fluid, and we have debates about these pronouns and stuff like that. And it's really interesting hearing someone of the opposite view and hearing how they put their arguments forward. In fact, it would be great to have someone on that perhaps have a different point of view and get their perspective on things. And I'm always open to be convinced the other way around, and perhaps not entirely, but on certain subjects. And I don't know, it's a great topic. I love it.
I got to say, I would be astounded if somebody could convince me that it was all right for transgender people to fight female fighters. Or even the other way as well. I just don't think that it's possible to convince me that that's okay. However, I will have a conversation with anyone about anyone. Right, last thing on this sort of subject, Craig, because I find this is really interesting, and it kind of opens up even more. Craig says, in a physical sport, you need to make it a fair competition. Hence, you have different weight brackets, etc. If it's just a free-for-all, then why not bring in drugs, etc., and just leave it open for everything? So steroids, human growth hormone, and you could just let anyone fight anyone. You wouldn't do it, would you? You wouldn't let Francis Ngannou fight Mighty Mouse Johnson.
That'd be kind of interesting. Though. I'd be curious.
I think Mighty Mouse would win. But there's a reason they stopped doing those types of fights from the early UFCs, because they weren't safe for a start. And
it's like Cejudo trying to fight, like, what's it? He wants to be like fight the women fighters, right? Wasn't it for a while?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that was one of his little. He had like periods, didn't he, where he would have all this wild stuff. And I think the female fighters. But then, maybe I'm a hypocrite because I said just before we went on air, I would love to see Jake Paul fight Amanda Nunes. So, maybe I'm a hypocrite. I don't know.
Like, as long as the person is fully aware of everything and like the dangers and the risks, like, so like if someone came to me and they're like, hey, this is the person, this is the circumstance, blah blah blah, like it's my decision to make, and that's what we're going on to. Like say I'm not against I'm not against transgender people. I don't have any necessary like negative thoughts towards them. All I can say is like from a personal standpoint as to what I would do if I was offered the situation. Like I said, as long as everyone's happy and doing what's best for themselves, that's cool. But I don't have anything against them. I just personally wouldn't fight them myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Right then, Cory, we've kept you a little bit longer than we said, so I apologise for that. But you've been exceptionally interesting to talk to, and people have been awesome. People have been loving you in the chat. They think you're fantastic, and they say how great you are. So you're obviously we'll have you on again, perhaps. When you're getting ready for your next fight, we'll get you on to have a chat about that. But it's been good fun, mate, and I really appreciate obviously your time. And we'll see you again, Danny. Was there anything you wanted to ask Cory before we left? Because I know.
Now you've opened the can of worms.
But you literally got. She's 15 minutes over time. She's charged.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's okay.
I would save it for another time. But has been really, really interesting talking to you, and you've got so much to say, and not just mindless stuff. You really explain why you forged your opinions on not just the subject we just discussed, but on anything. You put yourself over very, very well, and I really would love to have you on again and get to know you more.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Good work. Cheers, Cory. See you again. Cheers.
Yeah, we could have gone on all night with that one.
I could not believe that how much time had passed, and I was like, oh God, we've gone over the hour, and we're like into the second hour, but we got some stuff to talk about. So I mentioned this a little bit at the start. Obviously, earlier on today, it was rumored. I don't know if it's been 100% confirmed, but from the boxing point of view, Mike Tyson is going to fight Logan Paul in January, I think it was. I would assume it'll be a kind of like an exhibition, similar to when he fought Floyd Mayweather. Doesn't do it for me, mate. I probably will watch the highlights, and that'll be about it. But what do you think of that? Like Mike Tyson, he's no spring chicken.
No, it's not. It comes with concerns because we kept putting hopes on someone.
Someone's going to stamp them.
Yeah, stamping their run of wins, down, and it hasn't happened time and time again, and it starts to make you doubt, whether someone can. Yeah, I mean, you can't help but think that Tyson would be a step too much, even in his sort of like older years. He is still in great shape. Reactions are definitely going to be slower than they ever was. He would be giving away some height, although he's no stranger to that, but that was in his competitive years. I don't know. And Tyson is not the Tyson that he used to be, regardless of his physicality with age. He's mentally matured and become much more placid. Yeah, but mentally, if you hear him, he's become quite a deep thinking guy. More spiritual in his thinking.
He's still bonkers, mate.
Well, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of him. I think he still could come with strong attitude. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think he's the Tyson of old, both physically or mentally. does that mean that he's a pushover for anyone in boxing terms at that level? No, but yeah, my confidence has been knocked that someone that's decades past their prime can step in against someone who is in their prime, although not of their level in terms of what they've achieved. You just don't know. I just don't know. And I'll watch it out of interest and watch it in hopes, fingers crossed, that someone puts a stop to them. We shall see.
100%, mate.
I mean, it's going to generate huge attention and huge amounts of money, and that's what it's all been about, really.
Yes, indeed, mate. Other bits of news: Dana White. We mentioned Paulo Costa and his weight cutting issues this week. Dana White has said that he must remain at light heavyweight now. He's not. He doesn't want him going back to middleweight. However, Paulo Costa said after his fight that he was planning to go back to middleweight.
Yeah, I mean, he looks huge. So, I can't imagine he could get down to middleweight anymore. But well done, Dana White. Force his hand now.
Yeah, but then ultimately, I think when you look at the rankings, light heavyweight might be a better route to a title for him than middleweight.
Could be, yeah, because in that fight, I mean, we might as well discuss it now. We're on it, I guess. I don't know whether you want to do it that way around.
Yeah, go on. We'll start with the main event.
He started to look gassed really early on, didn't he? But he just kept going on like it. So maybe being that he didn't have to do the weight cut, okay, he'll get to that point of being gassed, but his physicality in terms of being really healthy and being naturally athletic, he can recover within the realms of that round and come on again and again. He just kept coming, didn't he? He did really good. In fact, I would say he arguably looked better in the round 4 and 5 than he did in rounds 1, 2, or 3. So, that was kind of strange. It's largely Vettori that began to slow up, which we have seen from Vettori previously. But Vettori did great. He did great. I think he was out exchanging him in volume predominantly. But my goodness, some of those kicks Costa was throwing so brutally hard. And he received one of them on the side of the neck and chin. Vettori took one clean and staggered somewhat. In fact, Vettori did get staggered a few times, but he recovered very, very well. Conducted himself amazingly, and I'm really, really impressed with his defense work. Considering Costa looks a little bit vulnerable at times. I don't know whether you would agree with me on that.
I think Adesanya has damaged him, mate. I do. I really think.
Yeah, not made him perhaps not to feel so so invincible now, but possibly I don't know. But didn't like his attitude. It's going to do no favors regards adding to his fan base. Although there'll be some that will consolidate it for them that love the bad boys. But I didn't like his attitude towards the whole weight issue, and I've just got even more respect for Vettori. Choosing to do it how he done it and still come away victorious. Really, really impressed with him. Like I said before, I feel like he's on the increment still of the expression of truly what he can become in the MMA world, and I think he's ever becoming the better Vettori year after year. So I'm excited to see what he can do. He's making better decisions in his fights. He's looking technically better, looking defensively really tight. I mean, come on, and not only has he got a good chin, but he's also very, very good at protecting his chin. His chin only got accessed a few times by Costa in those 5-5s, and I was really impressed with that. Yeah.
Costa said after the fight, mate, that he felt that he won, like he was convinced that he won the fight. There was no way for me that he won that fight. Did you think it was even close? Like in terms of scoring?
I think that it depends on how heavily you score what. I think for consequential striking and for the most impactful striking, Paulo Costa won those exchanges in that sense. But in terms of the actual fight, if you're going to score the fight in the traditional sense, in volume of shots landing, work rate, maybe versatility of what you was expressing regards to it being an MMA sport with takedown attempts and mixing it up a little bit, you would lean towards Vettori. But come on, Vettori won this. Vettori won it hands down. I can't see it going to Costa. Other than that thinking that I suggest, but Vettori is great.
So we'll work backwards because I want to talk about Bellator and Fedor as well as, and we got a couple of fights on the prelims with the British guys.
Yeah.
So we had Grant Dawson and Rick Glenn fought to a majority draw, which you don't always see a hell of a lot of.
Yeah. We did with this one. Hang on, I'm just going to get to recap my memory. 1 second. Bear with me. All right. Yeah. This is really good because. Hang on, no, it's come up with the wrong one, hasn't it?
Technology versus Danny Batten.
Yeah, not very good. 1 second.
Technology
I'm trying to recap.
versus Batten. Dawson versus Rick Glenn, but fought to a majority draw. It was, I thought, a pretty good fight. I've only seen the highlights of this one, but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm just recapping who was who on this one because I was watching so many.
Yeah,
one gets confused.
Indeed. Well, you're getting old, aren't you? So
we'll put it down to that.
Put it down to that.
Oh my goodness!
Well, while we wait for Danny, to find his fight, I would like to know, or like to say, guys, if you want to see more of me, I was on the Experience Real podcast this week. That was out earlier today. So after the show, you can go and check that out at Experience Real YouTube channel podcast. Very, very good stuff. Really was my pleasure to be on there. So please go and check that out because obviously the more people which view it, the more people will have me on their podcasts. But anyway, right, Danny Batten.
I'm on it. Yeah, Dawson. Recap the zoo on this one now. Yeah, Dawson looked great in the first 2 rounds. I think it was clear that shooting in and getting Glenn down on the ground was going to be where it was at, try and get the win. But Glenn did a good job at least fighting the takedown somewhat. I mean, a couple of takedowns were clean, but he did a great job being defensive on the ground, not being having any damage racked up on him in any consequential way. And he started getting the time in to sprawl out on these shots. And Jocelyn was having to burn up more and more energy to try to get those ground scenarios. And indeed kept losing control of him. And it would go back up to the feet. And in that 3rd round, Glenn really come on strong. He started sprawling out on Dawson. Dawson was then on his back. And Dawson, because he kind of like gave all of his performance into those first 2 rounds, started looking really vulnerable. Glenn, I think if he was a little bit more powerful in his or explosive in his attacking game, because even on the feet, he didn't come with any power. In fact, his punches and kicks were rather laboured and slow. And on the ground, just didn't have devastating enough ground and pound. But nevertheless, let's digress, was absolutely dominant in that 3rd round. And also had the submission attempt at the end. And I think that submission attempt was what made it for at least 2 of the judges to score it a 10-8 and given it a well-earned draw. I think he really pulled it back from the depths. I think a draw was well-deserved because when he got the advantage, he kind of made it look like he could actually get the finish there. Dawson started to look really, really vulnerable. So a little lesson for Dawson, I think he needs to learn to use his skills and tactics to perhaps know when his energy levels are beginning to foul and those shoots and those entries might foul, and maybe sit back to some coast striking and just settle for the fact that he knew he was 2 rounds up and could have played a pretty much jab and move game. He could have just done that and maybe just enter in to push him up against the cage briefly just to break the rhythm up on the feet, and could have kind of limped home for the victory. But no, he kept shooting in, trying to do what he did in the first 2 rounds, and largely went against him and cost him the win and got it reverted to a draw because he fouled so heavily in that 3rd round trying to do what he'd done in the first 2. So I think a lesson to be learned tactically and strategically for Dawson, and well done Glenn for pulling it out, whether that was cornermanship that helped get him there or whether it's just his ability to adapt to the circumstance and pull it round, I don't know. But he did it, and well done to him because it wasn't going very well, was it, for the first 2?
No. Gaz says the fight IQ from Dawson was rubbish.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just talking about. Yeah,
you've got to kind of change. You've got to adapt, haven't you, to the way stuff goes, and you just didn't.
If you want to make impacts, getting into that top thing, you've got to have an adaptable, strategical thinking and team. But you've got to have the skill set to do that as well, and to make impressions at that level in UFC now, you have to be adaptable.
Yeah. Okay, next up, or before that, should I say, because we're going backwards. We had Jessica Rose Clark defeated Jocelyn Edwards via unanimous decision. So we'll fly through these now before we get to Mason and Jai. But where did you see this one going?
Yeah, this was. I found this quite an interesting little bout. It was, Justin Edwards just giving up the takedown too often. She did start to make changes and make it a little harder for Clark to get those takedowns, but yeah, Clark sort of found the ways to win and kept on prodding there, but it wasn't going all her own way. There were some times when Edwards was looking kind of good on the feet, and had some brief spell on top. But yeah, there was a clear hole in the capabilities defensively for Edwards up against the cage with her leg positioning. Upper body work wasn't too bad, but she was allowing Clark to step behind her rear leg and trip her back time and time again. She did try to counter it with like an inside leg trip, but just was not there for her. And again, she got taken down. So yeah, a little bit of lack of cage prep and cage knowledge, fixed positioning with her back against the fence that really let her down. She just gave away too many takedowns. But if she can address that, she could well be problematic for someone like Clark in perhaps, the coming year to 2 years if she makes these changes, because on the feet I think she looks quite explosive and dangerous. Some of those kicks went whizzing by, could have been impactful, but she weren't making them land because she was having to be so cautious of those entries that Clark was doing. But focusing on the person that won, which was Clark, she did great. Not a perfect performance by any stretch, but she did great. She knew where to take it to win it, and she did enough to do so. So well done to Clark.
Good stuff. The Alex Caracas defeated Sheng Wu Choi via submission, rear naked choke. 3.5 minutes round.
Yeah. That Caracas looked really, how can I say, like he's stepped out of a game or a movie. And but that Choi was all business. Choi was really impressing me. I liked seeing the little pre-play of their performances beforehand, and you can tell this guy's an explosive dude. If he gets an opportunity to finish, he'll be taking that finish wholeheartedly. Comes with a lot of intent, and my money was on Choi to win this from what I was seeing in the first few minutes. But that Caracas is a tricky customer. Not only is he really unorthodox on the feet and doing some strange, like oblique style kicks or side attack oblique kicks that we've seen that put Modestas out of UFCs recently. He's coming in with some nice body kicks as well. It just felt like he wasn't thick enough in the leg to be able to have an impactful enough body kick on Chow to sort of like make him wary enough, and Chow kept closing him down. But look, Caracas ended up sneakily taking the back, jumping up and securing that rear naked choke. And that's the thing with Caracas. You cannot write him off. His knockout is not necessarily the strikes. His knockout is about getting those crafty submissions, either from the feet or on the ground. And he did it and set it up from the feet and then finished Choi on the ground. Choi must have been really disappointed, because I really feel that he was making real establishment of dominance in there, and then all of a sudden it goes and slip away from him. But facing someone like Alex Caracas, that's what you got to face. You've got to be sure-footed all the way through and not make any of those errors. So lessons learned, but well done, Caracas. Pulled it out the bag again, which I think, if you see some of his fights previously, he's done that before.
Yeah, I thought I really liked the look of Choi, but ultimately Caracas managed to pull it off in the end.
Choi's a work in progress. I think he's going to be making some impacts in the near future. I think if he carries on improving and looking like that, just unfortunate. Yeah, he made a mistake, and against someone like that, you can't make him expect to survive, and he didn't. Hard lesson learned.
Exciting. Looks
he
like
does,
an exciting fighter. And then next up, we had, or should I say, on the prelims, we had two British guys fighting on the prelims this week. We had friend of the show, Mason Jones, and of course we had Jai Herbert. So we'll go with Mason first. A fantastic fight against David Omna, and fair play to David Omna. He took the fight on short notice. He stepped in after Mason's opponent pulled out. So, Mason could have been stuck without a fight. So fair play to David Onama. Not only did he step up, did he take a fight on short notice, but he turned up and he, gave as good as he got.
Yeah, I think he was, looking at the betting, I think he was really written off to just be fodder for Mason Jones, but was not the case. Onama showed great striking prowess, great combinations, explosivity and athleticism, and desire to win it. He was not there as a pushover. He wasn't there just to try to, get a bonus and just try and put on a great display of flurries and then keel over on his back and lose. He was there to win it through and through, and he nearly did. Listen, Mason Jones, I don't think he's doing it to try and impress anyone by doing the type of style that he's doing. I think it's just him, but he's got to change that. I think he's going to burn himself out and have a short career fighting with his face, so to speak. The kid's got skills. He's got skills.
He's phenomenal, isn't he? But
he's got
so much damage, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got the striking capability to slip these shots and pick his shots a little bit. Clearly, he's got cardio for days to be able to push that kind of intensity. Clearly, he's very, very courageous. But you hold all that back and pick your opportunities to shine at the right times throughout each round. And I just want to see him not slow down, but be more choiceful. When we spoke about Jack Shaw making such good decisions, he just needs to make better decisions from Mma. It's great viewing, and he had you on the edge of your seat every single time, but he's going to have a short career doing it. I can't see someone fighting with the face like that, having a long career. It's not going to be long before eventually some of these shots are going to start becoming an off switch for him. And I'd hate to see that, because this kid's full of potential. He's got great takedown capabilities. He is so talented. He's got skills for miles. He really, really has. But he needs to use them in the right order and with the right intensity. You can't just go all the time. You've got to go and trigger because there's an opening to do so. And he left himself vulnerable. And Mma, we took full advantage of it several times. I actually thought it was slipping away from Mason Jones on numerous occasions. And I was cringing. I was just shouting at the screen, slow down.
Hell of a chin on him, though, mate, isn't it?
Oh, it is, but that chin is not going to be there forever. It really isn't. And what about scar tissue? That can become a problem if he starts getting cut. If you start facing someone that starts throwing elbows,
he always seems to get cut under the eye.
Okay, yeah. Some of these guys are going to be throwing up knees. They're going to be throwing elbows in those kind of exchanges. I do worry for him a little bit because I don't think we're seeing him fight tactically or strategically to his best potentials. We're seeing that he's got everything that it takes to be the very, very best in UFC. But to do that, you've got to be a great decision maker. And that's something I want to see him make increments on.
I think as well, like in Cage Warriors, he just ran through everyone, didn't he? And he was able to take any shot anyone gave him and kind of like just went and did what he wanted, basically, to whoever his opponent was. But the standard of opponent is better. So you just have to be careful. Maybe just a few adjustments, just to perhaps, I don't know, like just a few minor alterations maybe in the tactics. But not for me to say, but just from what you're saying, that seems to be what you're thinking along the lines of. So the other Brit was Jai Herbert fought on the prelims. I was so happy for Jai Herbert because he's had a couple of, he's been a bit unlucky in the UFC so far. So I was really happy to see him finally show what he could do. And boy, did he show what he could do. He did. A very difficult opponent, by the way. Karma Worthy, I think up until his last fight, has been kind of doing some real good stuff.
He has. But Worthy's form, the way he holds his hand positioning, and the way he stances and the way he generally strikes, he fights with a more of a slightly open guard. And this gives him both nice vision to strike and be dangerous as a predatorial style striker, but it does mean against someone who's super sharp, super rangy, and got that height, and that's Jai Herbert. That's just made for him striking. So I'm absolutely not surprised that he's caught Worthy out. But yes, he did look very, very good, very, very good. He looked more cautious of the potential to be taken down, which we saw happen to him. And he also was making the better decisions, like I was saying about Mason Jones, with his striking combinations. Wasn't overdoing it in the pocket. He was really picking his shots and picking his combinations. And I just loved the footwork. The footwork was really evasive of any returning fire. And also of any potential takedowns. You're really leg sipping, circling out, really showing range awareness. Really, really great performance. I would be more convinced that Jai Herbert's made the appropriate changes to improve himself to stay relevant in UFC had he fought someone that was willing to perhaps press the entry for a takedown and see how he actually would go about continuing to avoid being clinched up and using that footwork as anti-wrestling. I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more. We didn't really get to see that with Worthy because Worthy wants to stand and bang as well. But look, let's not take anything away from that performance. It was great. It was needed. It's come at a good time. He's back on winning ways. Let's get him back in there quite soon because he's looking super sharp.
And they've given him some tricky fights. They
have
faced Francisco Trinaldo, and he lost via a TKO in the third round. Then he faced Moisiano and lost in the second round via submission.
Yeah.
So I think I can see why they give him this fight. Someone who was going to bang with him because it suits give him the confidence to push on. Because I do think he needs that extra. Maybe after that second fight and going in 2-0 in the UFC, maybe he just needed something to pick him up a little bit.
Absolutely, I think
Kama Worthy could have caught him, and then it's the same.
Yeah, he's a potentially a dangerous person to come up against. But like I said, I just feel like it was so suitable for Jai Herbert stylistically. I would love to see him fight Trinaldo again. I think he would beat this guy for days. I really do, especially with what seems to be his improvements with his tactical mind and tactical thinking. Much more space aware, distance aware. And I think that's what's going to see him continue to get those positive results in UFC.
Spot on, mate. So I just want to quickly talk a bit of Bellator from last night, mate, and then we'll wrap up. We had the legendary Fedor fought on the card, but just before we talk that, did you see the Aiden Lee fight?
No, I haven't.
Aiden Lee, obviously popular British fighter from the West Country. They had a good evening last night. He fought on the prelims versus Alexander Ostarev and won via a rear naked choke in the first round. Looked good.
Great stuff.
I really like Aiden Lee as well as a fighter, so I'm looking forward to seeing. Hopefully he can push on up those sort of Bellator rankings and maybe get on. But I wanted you as an MMA legend yourself, mate, to tell me and the viewers a little bit about why Fedor is so beloved by the MMA fans and community, and also about his performance last night in the main event on a card in Russia for the first time in Bellator history.
Yeah, Fedor's really loved. He's been around for a very long time, but I think he's loved because he comes with this confident persona where it says so much without saying any words. He's emotionless. He's like a poker player. You can't read into him. Even if he's in a real slugfest of physicality, he don't even look like he's breathing hard. And the guy clearly is not genetically gifted in terms of muscularity or anything like that. You know, he looks like someone who would stand at a bar having a beer on a Friday night. But the guy is technically very, very good in his delivery of takedowns, submissions, and his strikes. I'm a little cautious to say his defense is good. He's clearly very, very sharp still and aware of strikes coming, and uses elusivity as his main line of defense because his hands are literally on his holsters. His hands are down by his waist. But that consequentially gives him very, very fast hands because his arms are down by his side, so loose. And he's just got a real sharp eye to make it land. And boy, did he make it land. But look, this guy fights guys that are huge in comparison to him. And Fedor's not the biggest of heavyweights. He's not like an enormous guy, but that Johnson was big. And trust me, if he starts landing on the right type of buttons on Fedor, he'll put Fedor down, as we've seen in the past from Fedor. But Fedor, I think was that something like his 40th win? Something along those lines. He's had he's been around it a long time and only lost 6 times. And this guy, like you said, is in his mid-40s. I mean, that's incredible. That is incredible.
Still got the power, mate.
Yeah, we've largely been mocking people of that age. Now, is Fedor up there with top tier guys that are 20 years his youth? No, he's not. Yeah, and
in Bellator.
In Bellator maybe. I don't see Bellator in comparison to the kind of depth of talent as UFC. I really don't.
What is he, heavyweight, isn't he? He's got.
Yeah, he's just fights. Yeah.
So, yeah. When you look at the UFC's depth in heavyweights, and even they're looking for heavyweights, but
he's that dangerous though on the feet. Yes, he could get the wins, but I think it would be win loss. Yeah. Win loss win. It'd be a bit like that for him. I think if he come over to UFC, the guy ain't a young man, but he always fights the same way. He fights with such ferocity. Of course, he's good to watch, and I just think people are just bewildered by his expressionless performances. I mean, he don't really jump up for joy when he wins, or he's just such a calm character.
Like he couldn't have cared less in the world.
Yeah.
And
I've
like
met
the
Fedor,
Russians are going nuts as well.
Yeah. I mean, he deserves his legendary status. I'm not like we said numerous times about people in their 40s. They really, really perhaps shouldn't be in there for their own health. Really, you would think. I hope he don't go on too long, but how can you argue against it when he keeps on getting wins? Yeah, and it is entertaining.
Specifically, he is entertaining.
Yeah, and his style doesn't show his age. I mean, you see other people really move like they're old people. He kind of still moves the same way it always has done. And his style, although his style is personal to him, does and would fall short in terms of the kind of level of completion of MMA. At that weight, say UFC level, they're just too well rounded. He would be getting his losses. If he fought any one of the top 15 in the UFC. But, I'm not trying to take away from his astounding performances over his lifetime. The guy's been about for decades and constantly got wins no matter what promotion he's been on. But let's just remind ourselves and be realistic. He is doing, in a promotion that is not of the highest order of caliber and in depth, and particularly in that weight division as well. It's hardly shining in talent, and I don't want to sound like I'm being overcritical. I just want to be realistic to that for the viewers. Yes, Fedor's doing well. Yes, he's still good to watch. Yes, he can still get wins against certain caliber guys. As long as he's still in there performing it against that sort of caliber and not the kind of UFC caliber, I'm all for seeing him. But I just hope he don't carry on too long and start getting him put in there with some real true youthful monsters and tainting his legacy in any kind of way. I'm more to the point, I don't think he'll necessarily even do that. I think he'll always be respected, but I just don't want to see that happen to a guy
who's only
they're getting old.
6 times or something in his whole career.
Yeah, and that's incredible, really. That is really, really incredible.
There we go. But so that's pretty much the night's MMA, and a massive thank you to Cory McKenna for joining us. Really.
She was awesome.
Fantastic.
She was awesome.
Stuff. I really enjoyed that greatly. She'll be back again at some point. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, Sam Creasy will be joining us. But we'll see. Hopefully, he will be joining us though, with a bit of luck. But in the meantime, I'll be back tomorrow with a special championship call-in show tomorrow with everything going on in the Sky Bet Championship. So please do join us for that. Don't forget, check out Experience Real podcast with myself. I traveled up there to speak to Joe earlier this week, and that's now out. You could check it out. I talk about my life, my car crash, how I dealt with it, how I didn't deal with it, all different things. Quite personal. But also we talk about the podcast and stuff and how I got there and whatnot. But yes, interesting nonetheless. So check it out. Experience Real YouTube channel, and have a look. Why not? Because obviously the more people who watch that, looks good for me. But yeah, Danny, it's been a pleasure, my friend, as always. So next week and then the week after is quite mental for UFC, because we got UFC pay-per-views back to back, which is not the like the usual, is it, to have them so close together? They're normally about a month-ish apart. So next week, UFC 267, main evented by Jan Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira, and Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen. Dan Hooker's also fighting, Volkov's fighting.
Some awesome fights.
Chimaev's fighting against.
Who are you going for the main two? I'm going to go Teixeira, even though it does worry me. He's cracking on in years a little bit, but Teixeira, I like his style. But Blachowicz is so well rounded.
Blachowicz would.
Yeah. He possibly will, but I'm going to go Teixeira. I'm kind of going with my heart a little bit on that, although I'm a big fan of Blachowicz as well. But Teixeira, I think he's looked great when he's on form. But is it coming a bit too late in his lifetime? I don't know. Yeah, that time will tell. But Petr Yan and Sandhagen, they're very, very different body types in there. It's going to be really, really interesting. But if I'm pushed to give a nod, I'm going to give it to Petr Yan.
Yeah, me too. Petr Yan's an animal, absolute animal. One other fight, which is really, apart from Chimaev versus Li Jingliang, like I'm really interested to see how Chimaev does, because he hasn't been in for a while. But the opening fight on the main card is Makhmed Ankalaev versus Volkan Ozdemir. I am fascinated by that at light heavyweight. I think that could be a sleeper. And then the week after that, Dan, is UFC 268. So UFC 267, swiftly followed by UFC 268, with the main event being Usman versus Covington. The co-main event is Namajunas versus Zhang Weili, and Michael Chandler's fighting Gaethje, Frankie Edgar's fighting Vera, Quarantilio's fighting Shane Burgos, and even on the prelims, you've got Ali Aquinta versus Bobby Green.
Wow, that's a stacked card.
Shabazian versus Amayov. And the early prelims, Ian Gary's fighting Jordan Williams. And something else. No, Ian Gary is the one, obviously looking forward to that one. That'd be his debut, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he's going to make some impacts. Debut. Although it's going to be interesting because I think he's changed teams, hasn't he? Always freelance. Don't know where he's training with anyone, isn't he?
So that's the week of my birthday, that is, as well. The week, Sunday before my birthday, that is. So I'm looking forward to that. And then the week after that, we've got Max Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez. Woo! Oh, and they're running back Kevin Holland versus Carl Dukas. So that'll be good. It's going to be interesting, mate. It's going to be interesting. Right. We'll be back next week. It's been a pleasure, as always. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Cory. Big thank you to Danny. We'll see you next week. Bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Yeah.
it.